all of you for your interest. And of course, thank you to Pebbles and to Shai for inviting me, for curating this amazing program, because it really is an amazing program. Anyhow, before we go, you can all see my screen, right?
Yep.
Yes, awesome, thank you. So as Pebbles was saying, I'm a digital media expert, creative strategist, and two-time founder at the intersection of business, technology, and society. And I just want to mention that my current work focus is on reimagining philanthropy in the digital age. I won't get much into it right now, but maybe later we can talk about it. So in 2015, I co-founded the Internet Freedom Festival with the goal of breaking down the silos among groups working to defend the free and open and accessible internet around the globe. The IFF is a pioneer nonprofit for the development of diverse, inclusive, and safe spaces for the collaborative advancement of human rights in the digital age. We built together a human rights defender network that extends over 140 countries these days. And it's an incredible mix of cultures, of languages, of perspectives, of ideas that I invite you all to check out. This year's gathering happened, of course, because of the COVID situation, but we're hoping to be bringing it back again next year. It brings together hackers, it brings together technologists, activists, nonprofits, people from governments. It's truly a plethora of basically everything and everyone that is interested in building a better internet for everyone. And it is through this initiative I've met and many people I came to personally admire. I admire the bravery and the ingenuity of many of these individuals. And just two examples of this are, for example, projects like Touche, which is a project that basically what they're doing is they're beaming up internet content through satellite television networks to bypass censorship in Iran. And now they're trying to use the same technology to provide educational content and all sorts of relevant content in areas where there is no internet access. So think about rural areas in Africa and South America, etc. And and other cool initiatives like flash drives for freedom from the Human Rights Foundation, when they're collecting and smuggling USBs into North Korea to distribute outside information, which is also a very, very cool idea. And before we continue, yes, please, you can interrupt at any point. If you want to hear more about something, you can type and I'll pause. I would like this to be more of a conversation, if we can. So feel free to at any point just type something, and I'll try to keep an eye on the chat. Cool. So, alongside censorship, one of the main battlegrounds for these freedom fighters is online privacy, of course. And the interesting thing is that for all the ingenuity and innovative thinking displayed around censorship and the project that you saw, there seems to be a lack of originality in how we've been presenting the issue of privacy online. A study by PEN America found that in over 100 blog posts and articles about surveillance, it was George Orwell's 1984, the sole literally metaphor that was employed. And I'm sure you all know 1984 and the Big Brother and all this. It's been used and used again and used again. It's been overused. And you would think that makes sense, right? Like the vision of a Big Brother relentlessly watching all your movements. It seems like the perfect metaphor for how technology is increasingly controlling every aspect of our lives. But some scholars have pointed out that the problem with the Big Brother metaphor is that it places the emphasis on surveillance. So the emphasis is put on information collection versus in the storage, use, and analysis of aggregated data. So information collection versus the processing of that information. And at this point, we could probably ask, well, does it really matter? We'll see. It seems like the message was working, right? As you can see in this graph, there is an increase over time. There's a growing concern over the invasion of privacy. I think that we can see that, we can sense that. Everyone is now talking about privacy, right? But yet it seems like something is wrong, right? Like even though many believe that privacy is a crisis right now, when they ask if they would be willing to pay for services that respected their privacy, for some reason the majority said no. So we understand that privacy is a concern. However, we are not willing to do anything about it. So how do we get to this situation, right? Like why we have a majority that is concerned, and yet it seems like everybody has accepted this as inevitable. It makes no sense. Just give me 1 second, because there you go. Can you still hear me? Yeah, awesome. So as it turns out, narratives matter, and they matter a lot. Because narratives are essential for the public understanding of complex problems, for moving people to action, and for unifying a collective vision towards a common goal. But on the other side of that coin, using the wrong narratives also has consequences. You know, it can lead to taking the wrong course of action, and they can even promote apathy rather than the action that we're looking for. So let's forget about the Big Brother for a second and try to identify the root of the problem with privacy. We could say that privacy affects the power relationships between society, corporations, and the institutions of the modern state. I'm gonna just pause here for a second to take that in, okay? The power relationships between society, corporations, and the institutions of the modern state. So what happens here is that the exploitation of privacy doesn't simply result in an individual harm. So we shouldn't so much be concerned about our privacy, but our collective as an individual, but what happens to us as a society collectively. It results in a social harm, not just an individual harm. And this discriminatory data craze leads to the building of inequality boosting algorithms, vulnerable democratic processes, human rights endangering business models. We are now seeing all of these taking place, and it's almost like happened overnight, but it certainly didn't happen overnight. The reality is that nobody wants your data. They want our data, because one person's data is useless. So privacy isn't about me, it's about us, because big tech feeds on us, not on me. And that's why I believe that we could use a change in perspective when talking about privacy. And I suggest talking about respecting privacy or thinking about privacy in the same way that we think about talking about the environment and respecting the environment. In this sense, the overexploitation of our privacy then is akin to the overexploitation of natural resources. And that's because in both cases, this leads to a great social harm, and it's difficult to point fingers to an individual cause or source of the problem. And, you know, this opens up an interesting idea, because now, if we're putting those side by side, those two worlds that were up until now completely different realities, then when we start comparing them, we can also start drawing similarities and start drawing inspiration from one another. So, you know, what happens like when we draw inspiration from the environmental movement to defend online privacy? You know? So all of a sudden we could be thinking about, well, maybe we can start talking about data consciousness instead of, and the same way that we talk about being environmentally conscious. We could think about labeling tech platforms in a similar way as we do when we label appliances or cars that are very polluting. And we have this different stickers and different scales that allow us to label and identify which are more problematic. We could do similar things with tech platforms. We could, you know, have plugins, extensions in our browsers, you know, to keep track of how much data waste we're producing. You know, like based on our navigation, we could estimate, you know, if we spend a lot of time in these platforms that highly surveil us, that would mean that we are leaving a higher data trace and producing more data waste, you know. And we could have educational data waste reducing programs at schools, the same way that we have with, you know, environmental programs of recycling and et cetera, you know. So I just want to use this moment. Let's take a pause here. Pebbles, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. There is a question from the audience. What is data waste?
Excellent question. So data waste is a concept that I just made up. It's not something that it's labeled or it really exists. Data waste is my exploration of can we, you know, when comparing the environmental problem with the privacy problem. In the environmental movement, we talk about waste or pollution. So I wanted to use the same terms to talk about data and talk about data waste and data pollution. So that's, I'm using the same narratives and the same metaphors to try to illustrate a problem that otherwise seems a little too much virtual, in the sense that it just lives in our screens and it cannot touch us, it cannot reach us, and that's not the reality. I don't know if that answered the question. But I would like to take a moment. I just downloaded a lot of information on you. I think that some people, from what I saw in the chat, were starting to, you know, their gears started turning when they heard about this idea of, oh yeah, like let's talk about that. Let's talk about privacy like an environmental issue. So if we could take just 5 minutes now in groups to come up with some additional examples on how can we perhaps like illustrate this data problem as an environmental problem. I think it'll be interesting if we could do that and then quickly share some of them. Is it possible?
For sure. I'm going to put you guys in the breakout room. How long you want them to discuss? 5 minutes.
Yeah, 5 minutes, fine.
Okay.
Are you all up for it? If not, we can continue.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So I'm going to put 3 to 4 people in one room randomly now. Open all rooms. I'm going. Hi, Victor. They are assigned. They are in a breakout room, so I'm going to put you in one of the rooms. Am I in one of the rooms? I don't hear anything. I don't hear Jabu. I don't hear you at all. Hold on. You hear me? Did you guys manage? In the breakout room? Okay, good. Awesome. Pepe,
Are we
Very
back?
we are back.
Sweet. And you can still see my presentation. Is that a yes? Yes.
Where is your presentation? No,
I
I
can't
can't
see your screen at the moment. At
No,
least.
we cannot.
You cannot. Okay.
No.
It was a no. Sorry.
Let's see if I can. How about now?
Yes.
Perfect.
Sweet. Just want to quickly share one thing that stood out. I was in a group as well, of course, and you know how much, and at least in my group, there was a consensus that many people they were very conscious about this, and many people were almost seemed to be not very, they were not very active online. They didn't want to be very active online. Just and that is just a shocking contrast with, you know, with the experience that I lived at the Hyper Island just 7-8 years ago, when back then it was almost like you were not cool if you were not constantly signing up to the new whatever new platform or website or service just came up. So I'm just gonna leave that out there as a personal reflection of what's going on and how rapidly things are changing and where things are going, right? But let's move on now. I don't want to focus on privacy today. I just wanted to touch upon it, and I just wanted to touch upon it not just about the problem with privacy, but the problem with only talking about privacy in a certain way. Because to me, that is the real issue with this. So I hope I inspired you a tiny bit, like talking about this privacy as an environmental issue, because it's one of the many ways that we can open up discussions about privacy in a different way. But now I want to take you down this path of exploration beyond privacy and into how technology shapes society at large. Let's see if this works. You can still see my screen, right? Yes, thank you, Thomas. So one of my favorite scholars on this matter is Ethan Zuckerman. He's the former director of the MIT Center for Civic Media, and fun fact, he's considered the creator of the pop-up ad. So you can direct all your hate mail to him later. So if you have an interest in understanding the tech giant's power to shape public discourse, I highly, highly recommend following this guy. And there's this essay that he published earlier this year, I think January this year, where he talks about the case for digital public infrastructure. And this is a total must. And even if you don't have an interest in the matter, and I know that this may seem like not a very exciting title for an essay, but I'm tempted to say that you may be very interested once or if you read it. So to help us understand a little better this impact of tech in society, I extracted some insights from Zuckerman's piece. Number one is that the power of large companies like Google and Facebook, it comes not only from the dominance of their online business models that we all know, but also from their ability to direct attention. And this attention is the fundamental currency of the media world. And you perhaps have heard about concepts like surveillance capitalism and so on and so forth. Number two is the fact that the victory of the US and Chinese models has a strong tendency to make other models seem impractical. And what this means is the assumption that new media and services must be quickly sustainable through existing market models of advertising and subscription. So what this is saying is this is it, you know, the internet is this, the internet is Facebook and the internet is Google. And these models are so dominant that this must be the only way to operate. And thirdly, we rely entirely on Google's word that they're not skewing search results of a particular political affiliation. And we rely on Facebook's word that they're not suppressing any views. And so we completely rely on this platform. They're completely opaque and there's nothing that we can do about it. So what's this all amounts to is that, you know, we live in this internet that is controlled by a very, very tiny amount of people, and the impact that they have in society, it's extremely large in relation to the amount of people that are making decisions over us. So the picture that Zuckerman is painting is that because we see Google, Facebook, and other big tech, because we see them so dominant in this space, the interesting thing is that our, what we call the solution space for this is constrained, you know? So as he puts it, our solutions cannot be limited to asking these platforms to do a better job of meeting their civic obligations. We need to consider what technologies we want and need for digital media to have a productive role in democratic societies. So he's insisting this is not only about asking them to be better, this should be about us considering what are the technologies we want and we need. So what's happening here is that there seems to be an imagination deficit. And this imagination deficit is at the center of our failure to respond to the challenges of the digital age. Zuckerman argues that we're comfortable criticizing existing digital platforms, but we're nowhere near as good at proposing and exploring alternatives. So as he says, this failure of imagination means that we are ceding the future of the internet to the companies that have already taken power. Where he's saying, there's nothing we can do, they win. So I'm going to take another pause here. I know that this is very loaded and I want you all to stay awake and engaged. And I think what's fascinating about Zuckerman's thinking is that it's his invitation to imagination. You know, it's his invitation to inspire others, and through this inspiration, how we may have a chance at rebalancing the power balance in the digital age. And this is particularly important, I believe, for people like you, because you're all designers and content creators and creatives, and this is something that you know very well how to do. So Zuckerman is opening that door for us and saying, you don't need to be a technologist, you don't need to be a lawyer, you need to be a politician. You can help by imagining the future that we want, because that's exactly what we need right now.
May I have a question?
Please.
Do you mean that we as content developers or creatives can have a kind of showing the scary future and showing the consequences of sharing too much information with different platforms on social medias, or just, I don't know. I mean, if we are going to show these consequences, we need to be aware of them before anyone else. So how we should be aware of the consequences, then we can deliver this message to other people.
Yeah, excellent question. And that question goes to the core, to the heart of what I'm trying to share today, and that is that this is not so much about let's find ways to tell everyone how bad things are. You know, as a matter of fact, there's a lot of research that talks about how we talk too much about negative issues in the nonprofit sector, in international development. We abuse too much of negativity, and we need to be able to go beyond that negativity and to focus our creativity and our imagination into developing scenarios, futures, narratives that are hopeful, that are positive, and the key here, and we're about to talk about that in a little bit, so we're going ahead, is that there are ways to help in this process that where you don't need to be an expert. You know, you just need to understand a little bit to be able. It's like, you know, if we don't talk, sometimes technology tends to blind us because it seems like things are so complex that if we don't understand what's going on, we cannot participate. And that is not what Zuckerman is saying. What Zuckerman is saying is we first need to imagine the future that we want, not limiting ourselves to is it possible, or is it, you know, this is not about fantasy writing, but this is about understanding that we need to come together and reflect and learn to ask better questions before we can work on solutions. It's easier to just say, this is the problem, give me a solution. We are obsessed with solving problems too much. And we're losing the ability to think about alternatives to that. And that's where I think that creatives like you can help people who are, this is about joining forces with them. It's not the one can, no, it's about this joint of forces that I think that can help us take, like, leap to the next level that we need. Went a little bit off course there. Sorry, everyone, but it was an interesting question, and I wanted to make sure that I was addressing it. I cannot see the chat, by the way. So just let me know if there is something that I've missed, but because my chat is gone. Yeah, I don't know where it is. Sorry about that, folks.
No worry. If there is anything popping up, I will pop in to question.
Sweet. Any more questions? Shall we continue right now?
Sure.
All right. So I wanted to share with you a few of this examples of this reimagined digital domain that Zuckerman discusses in his essay, because I think they're interesting and they will help you get into that creative mode and into seeing things a little bit different in order to work on those futures that we want. So for instance, he talks about how, and this is something, all these things are things that are being discussed right now, right? Maybe you have heard a little bit about this, but people are discussing about perhaps like, could we tax the platforms and the services that are doing highly surveillance advertising, because if we could just taxing them with a 1% tax, because of the volume of their business is so large, we could actually start funding public service digital media out of those taxes, because this would generate an estimate of maybe 1 to 2 billion on funding, and all of a sudden we could be doing awesome things with those funds. We could think about how to create non-surveillance advertising networks, and this would directly challenge existing market leaders, and there are people right now who are thinking about how to develop advertising networks that are able to track you online without tracking you. And how do you do that? Well, they're working on that. And, other people are talking about, like, can you create a way for all of us to be the owners of our data? And then we can decide if we want to share that data with the platforms that we're using or not. Not the other way around, that we're just giving away that data fully, right? So before I wrap it up, I want to briefly talk to you about, how do we do that? And this is answering the previous question, which is like, I think speculative design can be helpful in this quest. And for those of you who have never heard about speculative design, it thrives on imagination, and it aims to open up new perspectives on what are sometimes called wicked problems, to create spaces for discussion and debate about alternative ways of being, and to inspire and encourage people's imagination to flow freely. This, if you don't have it, this is a very interesting book. It was published years ago. I think it was 2013. But it's very, very interesting. And as you enter in the creative stage of this module, I will highly recommend to have a look and maybe to read a little summary about this book, as it will help you in the process of reimagining the society that we live in and activate positive change, which I believe it was part of the brief that was created by Pepe and Shai for this model. So I want to finish up by conveying to you that there's an urgent necessity for the development of narratives as transformation tools. Because as I was mentioning earlier, we have become too focused on problem solving. We're not spending enough time thinking about problem framing, And in order to create that future that we want, we need to first be able to imagine it. Otherwise, we are forced to be as spectators. We are passive in this voyage for a future. We need to be active. And where technology has a great power to transform society, I believe that narratives have a great power to move society. And we need better questions to generate better solutions. So for all the technological and political complexities of the digital age, it's going to take dreamers to reach the future that we want. And that's why I want to leave you with my invitation to practice and inspire inquisitiveness. And that's what I have for you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Pepe.
Thank you.
Very well organized and keeping to time. And also that is great, because now finally we have a speaker that leaves a lot of room for questions. Because thus far, a lot of speakers have a quite dense like presentation, and all the way to the almost last 5 or 3 minutes, and leave quite little room for like interaction. So now it's a chance for actually a lot of time for you guys now to ask questions to Pepe.
Let's see who's awake.
Yeah. They are very, very hardworking people. They had
I'm
like,
sure.
like 3 intense lectures and they're still here. Very good. Very proud. So whom has questions? Shoot, a big round table.
It feels like we also ended with a note of talking about what questions to ask.
Exactly. It's a practice of art of questioning, you know. I think this is pretty much a lot in the practice of what we do. I mean, I really truly agree what Pepe said, you know, it's not only about just looking for solution, but it's asking the right questions. And I'm like wholeheartedly inviting all of you to come out more to practice this art of questioning. That's why I'm very naive.
Perhaps if we stop sharing and try and turn on some cameras, we could get more of a sense of being interactive.
Like everyone else whom has their camera turned off.
Maybe we can ask ourselves who has power in this situation, like, and who is it that we need to focus our minds on trying to reach and change.
Yeah, so I will do this. I'm going to facilitate the questions. I'm going to put you guys back into the breakout room, and each team is going to come up with 1 question to ask when we return. Yeah? In 3, 2, 1, you have 2 minutes to come up with a question, and every group would have 1 question. I'm going to make a bigger, lesser, 6 groups now. Okay, here you go. Bang. It is. For those who just got in, they are in the breakout rooms to ask questions.
I think I'll just stay here, if that's okay.
Emily, you just got here. You don't know what's happening, right?
Oh my god! Yeah, we just had a meeting, CP management. We'll
Okay.
just.
This is great, actually.
Okay, you can hang out here.
This is great, actually, because I just is this Shay and Pebbles? Yeah.
Yep,
Right.
sure.
Because I just messaged you on Slack. We have a quite burning question actually from the management team. So I would love for you to have a look on Slack
Sure.
and get back to me as soon as possible.
Yes, we have not been able to peel our eyes off from
I
this Zoom
understand
link.
that completely. But we just had a big meeting with all creative teams.
Okay, good. So like if you can't get our attention on Slack, come into the room and send us a private message. That could be possibly why.
I'm just gonna call one of them actually now, but feel free to answer the question as soon as you.
We will do that. I think after this call.
Can we just hang here and not be assigned to breakout rooms? Because I feel like we will have no idea what's going on.
Yeah. Stay here. Anyway, they're almost coming back.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. I've always just like, oh, another one coming in, and I just drop them into a room. They say, what's happening? So it's nice.
Emily.
Oh, she's just making a call to one of her teammates, I think. But yes, she messaged.
Well, I have a quick answer. It's quite easy.
Okay.
Responsible is the production team.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, we thought so too, but we were having a bit of some issues because marketing had interpreted it a bit differently, and I know that some of them really want to be within the creative process.
They are welcome to be in the creative process. It's not like...
Yeah, we did suggest that both production like take feedback and include marketing, or the ones that wanted to. But obviously we're also very limited on time. So the suggestion was production just come up with like a few kind of loose concept guidelines and then just like ask marketing for feedback and like, okay, which ones do you like? What should we go with?
Yeah.
Kind of like that.
So it's like it's a co-creation. Therefore, like everyone are welcome to be part of the process. At the end of the day, the people that will take the decision, or the ones that really need to produce the visuals, they are the production team, and therefore they are supposed to lead this. Yeah, but if there is someone from marketing that is interested, or the whole marketing group is interested, they're definitely most welcome to become part of this process. But they also need to understand in advance, like, what's their role and responsibility. And less, speaking about power, so less looking at it from a power, like, who has the power to choose, but more like looking at it that if we have such a limited amount of time, so for this sake of the whole for the whole development of the entire project, it's good that the marketing are taking responsibility for things that are more burning for the marketing strategy.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of what we figured. Okay, people are dropping back now, but thank you very much for that. Would you be so kind as to kind of just write that like really shortly as a response to Emily, just so we have like a written.
Yeah, we are actually in the process.
I was just talking to the marketing group, and I would love to get some specifics.
Yeah, I will fill you in, Emily. We just talked about it.
Yeah. And we are in the process of putting that on paper, on a document, like each team's responsibilities, etc. So it's going to be done right after this last lecture.
Exactly.
Right. And then we'll answer all your questions on Slack.
Thank you so much
for being so on the ball. Love the energy. Thank you.
Right,
Chase us. Like, yes, that's the right way.
We will. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. And everyone is coming back. I will close the breakout room. Hello, Visa. Were you not in any breakout rooms, or you just left one of them?
Yeah, we had a breakout room, but we left early.
Right. Okay. Good. I'm always curious what is happening in each room. They're coming back. Three seconds. Does your group has a question, Louisa?
Yes.
Great. Then maybe you can represent the group to ask the question. Yes. I need to hear more voices, get to know you guys better one by one. It's a big group, not easy to get some personal interaction, but we try.
And we're back.
Yes, live broadcast back online. So everyone is back. Awesome. So I guess there are 6 rooms, which means there are 6 good questions. We're expecting.
Can I ask
Pepe,
mine?
of course, yours or ours?
The group. I think the group, because I have it. Otherwise, I'm gonna lose it.
Okay, do it.
It's not actually a question. We were kind of interested in knowing if there is some example that it has already been made, because we've heard that the problem and the solution, but in order to think differently, maybe we need kind of someone to introduce us to a new methodology here, or a new process.
So the question, to clarify, is if there is a process to get to that.
To think differently and to come with better solutions, and
I see.
to make a better future based on something different.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I guess our main concern shouldn't be so much to perhaps think about how we can come up with solutions, but it should be how can we invite reflection? How can we invite reflection first upon ourselves, and later upon our circles, and later on in society at large, because these are what designers call wicked problems, which I'm sure that many of you have heard about, and these problems are so complex that they're almost paralyzing. You don't know where to begin tackling them, and what it ends up happening is that nothing happens, and then people start becoming obsessed with a certain problem, or a certain very tiny specific area within that very complex problem, and we keep nothing really. There's no advancement because we don't know that we are trapped in this cycle. So I shared with you a little bit about speculative design, because I think that through that lenses of speculative design, you may find some inspiration on what I mean by trying to inspire others to ask more questions and to think about futures, like potential futures, instead of just being obsessed about they are tracking me, I am being surveilled. There is too much talk about that and too little talk about what could be instead of what is wrong. So what I would encourage you to do is not so much to think about what is the process that is between an input and an output, because there is not one single output that is going to solve this problem. This problem is going to be solved by reframing, rethinking. So how can you invite other humans to be more reflective? How can you invite others, And if you want to make it more concrete, you know, how can you collaborate with the people who are thinking about the digital world? How can you open their eyes, you know? And maybe it's, you know, but you are content creators, you are designers. It is that awakening, and is that process of understanding that we need to fight that urge to just solve what is important right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mario.
Thank you. And the next team, maybe Lovisa would like to share. She has the question ready as well. Thank you, Mario.
Yeah, so we were talking about, you were talking a lot about this way of thinking, like we have to think what we want and the things we want to change and what we need. So if we would come up with something that we want to develop or think more about, like what or where can we share this? Because like now it seems this is the big companies like Google and all the other that kind of control everything. So they obviously not gonna listen. Like what's the first step to develop something we would like to see in the future in this field?
Well, that really depends on what you come up with. I'm sure that there are many people on the side of activism that would very much like any help or any support that, you know, moves to action and to leads to the, you know, society opening their eyes toward certain topics. But it really depends. Like, if it's something, is it an art piece? Is it a website? Is it a movement? Is it a campaign? Is it a fundraiser? You know, it can be anything. And you don't need to know. You don't need to find a specific cause to fight for. I think that's also another interesting idea. Maybe your role in this is to ask questions that no one's, you know, that you cannot find answers to. Maybe you go online and you type something on Google and no one's giving you a satisfying answer, right? Like I'll give you an example. What would happen if tomorrow Facebook, Google, Amazon, and Apple shut down? Would that change the world? Would that make the world better? Would that open space for some others to do something even worse? And if so, what needs to change to prevent that from happening? Like, is the problem really those companies, or is the problem part of the system? You know, as you see, like one question, it's like a thread, like you start pulling there and then something's. So it is the apparent simplicity of an apparent, you know, simple question, like it has the power to open up many minds, you know?
So it's a lot about like doing classical research and find the people that you want to work with or that also interested in the question.
It depends. Do you have an idea, for instance, of what you're thinking? No.
Not specific, but I'm like, I have no clue how to, like, I've never I don't know how this field works, but I'm really interested in like these questions that you brought up today. So I was more like, if I want to dig deeper, or if someone within like Hyper is coming up with something to work further on, like where to put that.
I see.
But I understand if there's no like specific place where you can go, or like there's not.
I can be a source for you, and I'll be happy to be a source for you, to keep answering your questions, to keep sending you more interesting ideas, because this is very complex. This is multifaceted, multi-layered. It involves politics and law and government. The internet is extremely complicated. You know, just understanding how the internet is governed, it's insane. And if you have never looked into that, I encourage you to look into that. You know, who governs the internet? You know, it's another fascinating idea. So I'll be happy to share my email. I can even, you know, weekly share with you some headlines, some things that will keep you up to date on this space. You know, does that work?
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Awesome.
Nice.
Yeah.
One connection established. One source established. Yes. Cool. The next one, whenever you feel free, no, ready, I mean, to represent your group.
I can go. In our group, we actually had several different questions that we're still debating towards the last seconds, which one to answer. So I think the one question that we looked at was, how far do you foresee the challenges that you see now? How far can we go with those challenges? What will happen in the next, say, 10 to 15 years? What do you see happening?
That is very difficult to answer. What I can tell you is that there seems to be a reckoning coming in this digital space, and it seems to be coming soon, basically. You have probably heard about how in the US, they are right now considering breaking up Facebook and Google, because they are starting to consider, and rightly so in my opinion, these platforms as monopolies. And
yeah,
they have been basically operating in a way that they have prevented competition to enter the spaces, and they have grown insanely, and no one else can enter the territory in their market. So that is, there's something that's going to change there, you know, and it's likely to happen, and to happen soon. But what happens after that? What happens after Facebook is broken down and after Google is broken? Like, we don't know. We don't know what that happens. We don't know how much that's going to change the digital world. So, but that's one thing to have to keep an eye into. And another thing that I would very much keep an eye on is the concept of the splinternet. Have you heard about the splinternet?
no. Please define what is that about?
So the splinternet is a concept that basically explains or defines an internet that is splintered, an internet that is divided. So in places like Russia or China, specifically in China, they are developing a digital ecosystem that is basically closed to the rest of the world. They have their own internal digital environment with their own platforms and their own services. And because of the way that international politics is happening right now between the US and China, there seems to be an increasing possibility that we reach a point where those internets are different, that we have a Western internet, if you want, and then a Chinese internet that are not connected at all, and therefore like it's going to look like more of a Western local net than the Chinese local net. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with that. And it's going to be very interesting to see, and you probably heard about TikTok being banned in the US.
Yep.
You've probably heard of like Tencent. I would encourage you to research into Tencent and into the huge digital tech platforms in China, because they are completely amazing what's happening over there. So that's the second thing that I would definitely keep an eye on in terms of understanding what the future of the internet is.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you, Jabu. And I think it's the fourth one, I would believe so. The fourth question. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, I'll go. We had a talk in my group about, it was mainly about privacy and like how do you protect. So we came from like 3 different like angles, but they all had to do with privacy. So basically I had a question about like, how do you as an everyday user protect your privacy? And then we had another person in the group talking about like, yeah, like everyone's so concerned about protecting their privacy, but at the same time we want ads that are relevant, for example, which is true. And then we had someone else bringing up the like is that what you use like VPNs for? Because like I have only used them to actually breach like to watch like other channels like in the US or in the UK, or when I'm not in Sweden, so it's like, how do you find that balance? And how can like, if like protection of privacy and data privacy is so important and it's so crucial nowadays, how do we protect it? But also like, how do we still okay, you understand? Yeah.
Thank you. That's a great question. This is making me think that if at some point you have the time and you want, I can try to set up a digital security clinic for those of you who are interested, because digital security clinics are basically about that. They're about teaching you, what tools should you be using, what's out there, what is dangerous, what's not. But digital security clinics, they all start with the same question, which is basically understanding what your threat model is, because your threat model is unique to you. It's not the same if you are an activist in Vietnam and if you are living in Brooklyn. And because of that, there is no one single recipe to say, and this is what you should be doing to protect yourself online. And that's why many people are always very cautious about offering digital security tips. But generally speaking, anything that prevents, like for the average user, like I, for instance, use Firefox as a browser because it's very, very effective in preventing, like pervasive cookies and like in blocking trackers and all of that. Like it works really, really well. VPNs, I think someone described VPNs to me. He said, when I'm on the internet and I'm not using a VPN, I feel naked. Because VPNs, what they do is basically they mask your traffic. So whoever is your internet provider, they do not know what you're browsing, because otherwise they can know, and is it an issue? Again, it depends on your threat model, right? But yeah, they're very useful for going over country restrictions, stuff like that, for Netflix, etc., etc. But yeah, that's not necessarily their main purpose. There are plenty of services. I would recommend going into checking out everything that the Mozilla Foundation does, because they have a number of tools. They recently released this tool that basically it provides masked email addresses. So like every time you want to sign up to something, you need to input your email, and we'll know what happens, right? So there's this new service that it fills. It's an extension you install on Firefox, and then it fills out that with a fake email. Not a fake email. It's an email that they create, and then they redirect all those emails to your real email, and that way you're not exposing your real email. So they're working on all sorts of cool stuff like that, and it's always for free. Generally, sometimes we have other things, but that's a great resource in general. And honestly, I could be talking about tools for hours. There's Signal if you want to use like encrypted chat. I know that many people in Europe, for example, Telegram is very popular for encrypted communications. But the issue with Telegram is that we don't know entirely what but like Telegram's source code is not entirely open, and Signal is, which makes a difference. Yes, Signal. Right. I'm reading the chat. Anyway, another thing I can do is, in this is probably going to become a newsletter now. I'm going to add a section with tools every week for you to try out. Sounds good?
Perfect.
Sounds amazing.
Cool, thanks.
We can also share our credit card info in the chat for Pepe to manage.
Please.
Yes. And we have 2 more questions. We are perfectly fine with the silence. I'm fine with it until someone speaks up.
I'm fine.
Let's play the silence game.
Yeah, in our group we had a question, but that got pretty much answered already. But maybe if you could tell us, that was a pretty good example. But if you could tell us another example of, a problem that we have seen in today that has been solved or worked around using this methodology that the speculative everything, in that sort of sense. Do you have any examples that you can share?
Yeah, that's what we wanted to ask too. If you had some example of like somebody say, imagining a scenario. I don't know if the blockchain is an example of that, but like some.
The blockchain, yes. Actually, let me talk a little bit about that.
Or maybe you got another example is better. I mean, I don't know. You.
No, but this can be used. So, there's a lot of speculation about the use of blockchain and all these technologies for the next evolution of the web. Some call it Web 3.0. And then there's a lot of a big craze also with the digital currencies and all that. But I'm not gonna get into digital currencies because that's another whole thing. But the blockchain is a very promising technology for many reasons, and it's a very promising technology for privacy, for example, because the blockchain allows for things like it really could mean a solution for many aspects of what the problem with privacy is right now, because it helps. I don't know how much I want to get into detail about this because it can get pretty technical quickly, but through the blockchain or using blockchain technologies, you can basically say who you are without, and in a way that is verified without exposing who you are. So you can have an identity without exposing who you really are. And it's been used for, there are several projects that are very interesting that are, they're trying to roll them out right now. There's somewhere in Switzerland, I think, they were having this pilot project on civic participation and on voting. Because the problem with voting online, for instance, is that right now with the technology that we have, there's no way to really make sure that who you say that you are, it's actually you, that there's not a duplicity into voting. It's way more complicated than it seems. You would think that it's just like, oh, I can just like click here and then I have voted, but it's very complicated. And the blockchain, it's very promising in solving all of that. And I will share, because I don't want to bore everyone with the long explanation or why it's interesting, but I will make sure to add that to this newsletter and to share that a specific example about using what are called trustless platforms for voting and stuff like that.
Cool. Thank you, Pepe.
There are also, just very quickly, there are also, if you check out the grant for the web, the Mozilla Foundation put together a big fund. I think it's $100 million US to fund projects that are developing alternative business models in the internet. And that's also a great resource to find, to check, because those are projects that are being developed right now. I think they just announced their list of the big grantees. So you can check that out, and there are lots of examples of people who are thinking differently about these problems.
Was thinking about, like, in the future, more and more of our homes will be connected to the internet, like smart products, and maybe that's a natural way for us to become like, hey, we don't want people to know everything that's happening also inside our homes, like. So sorry. Yeah, sorry. But yeah, maybe that's a natural way for us in the future to think of privacy when it comes to this digital sphere.
You mean that we are now all of a sudden going to be surrounded by the internet basically all around us, and how is that going to be a potential, additional opportunities for an invasion of our privacy? Is that where you're going?
Exactly. So we will have to think of this more and more, because it will be so much around us everywhere, like inside our homes as well. So the question of privacy will become very much like actualized.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's 5G, like that's what's gonna enable this revolution of the Internet of Things, and basically is gonna allow for everything around us to be connected to the internet, everything around us to be constantly collecting, processing, sending data. So it's now we're going to be generating information on the internet, and we'll keep doing that and doing it more. But now everything around us is also going to be generating information, and then that information around us is going to be tied to us because we own those devices, or because we are passing by near those devices, or because we are using or driving or those devices. Yeah. So yeah, this is definitely going to open lots of new questions about that.
Cool. Thank you, Pierre, for the question. So with time.
Thank you, Pierre.
Thank you. And if there are any last burning question? Okay. Nope. So maybe before we close the session, can I ask Pepe to leave one advice for them about, say, to become a digital activist? What advice would you leave behind for them?
One advice to become a digital activist.
How did you begin being a founder of Internet Freedom Festival? For example, you started your journey with that.
Well, it is when, honestly, what made me enter this world, full time, is when I realized that I didn't need to be born an activist to be part of this, and that I didn't need to know everything about law or international development or all these things to contribute and to participate. As a matter of fact, because there are so few people who have our skill set, our impact in this field is actually quite great, and we have a lot to offer. So rather than thinking, I know nothing about this, therefore I cannot contribute, I would encourage you to, proactively not only be interested, but I can tell you that anyone that runs a nonprofit, they would be more than delighted to receive an email from you. And it doesn't matter if you don't always have to work for Amnesty International, for Reporters Without Borders. It's sometimes the local projects that are having, the most profound impact locally. So get out there, explore what's out there, get in touch with people, connect with people, and you'll realize how much you can do.
Good one. Thank you, Pepe. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
It's been
you
a
all.
pleasure.
Yeah, they have been like
Thank you.
super hardworking from morning. And the theme of today is pretty much surrounding humane technology, data privacy, cyber security, ethical data. So it's quite dense day.
Yeah, I saw the program.
So with such, maybe we can do a little checkup for Pepe, Shai, and I. What's your key learning for today? Now you have taken so much. You can write on a chat. I will save the chat as a souvenir. And you can continue to write in chat, and then you can sign up. Just drop a note. And thank you, Pepe, for being with us for today, and more on Nunc Assembly on Power, right?
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Thank
you so much
you.
for the invitation.
You can hear my applause. Sometimes it gets too silent in the room. It's scary. I know that feeling. Yeah, but I'm assuming they are responding, you know, just it's in my head, the void. Okay. Thank you, Pepe. You can stay if you
Thank
want.
you.
I just want to see what they check out with.
Yeah, if I
of
can
course.
stay, I would love to see
the
the takeaways.
Of course. Right. Then it's like, what's something smart I can write? What's this something? It can be from Pepe's session as well. And if anyone, while us just staring at the chat, openly have a question or a comment, feel free to voice out. Let's make this as, comfortable as possible. I'm tired of hearing my own voice.
I'm gonna take the time to respond to some of you who have sent me private messages. I hope I don't miss anybody. Let's see.
Pepe for digital president.
Let's see.
What? Yeah, digital security clinic. Oh, what was it that you said? I found it super interesting. How would you help us? Can I ask you my question?
Digital security clinic?
Yeah. What does it mean? How would you help me? Save me.
It's a workshop. It's basically a workshop session.
Nice.
I can find a digital security expert who can run it for us. I guess we can do it online. So if there is an interest, then for sure I'll get in touch.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So much to explore in this ocean of digital void while someone is watching over the void.
Let me see. Let's see if I know how to answer to some things.
Digital doctor, if you're not the president. Do you know anything? How is it progressing with this kind of digital police against the other digital police? The good ones, the good cops. Okay, the anarchists versus the bad ones that are like watching over us. How do you see that? That's my personal question, because it came out this morning at Tom Lorenzo's session. It was
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I know you missed Tom's lecture, but I think he covered like kind of similar but different angle about ethical data or AI, and he mentioned about how now AI or machine learning is used on legal affairs, that like there is a judge to detect face, like what is the likelihood that one can be more of being a criminal. That's pretty scary in my opinion. So what do you think, like in that sense, like how could there be somewhat an association that can be defying this, like a force, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
As
there were some tests on like algorithmic justice, if you want, and in the US it was used a few times. It was not used as whatever the machine says, but it was used to help the judge reach a verdict. But of course that became very controversial, and luckily right now I think it's completely shut down. But the idea of controlling or like keeping algorithms under scrutiny is a very important area of discussion right now in the space. And there are people like Meredith Whittaker. She's a former Google employee. She used to lead open source projects at Google. And she left Google and she co-founded the AI Now Institute, which is right now one of the leading organizations that are trying to figure out, how do we keep algorithms accountable, and what are the how do we basically control algorithms? But there's so much that we don't understand about the algorithms themselves, about how they work, but also about the impact that they have. But what we know is that there is a lot of potential room for algorithms to basically promote and expand our biases, even our unconscious biases, in terms of racism, in terms of promoting inequality, and so on and so forth. Because after all, algorithms are not magic. They feed from our data, and our data is of course biased. So
yeah, and that which in the end we're subjected to still human power, right? Since like we can talk about machine learning and all of these, but end of the day there is still someone like a human that takes over and filter out information that even if machine learning can be, even if they are non-biased, which they actually are already, but in the end it will still be curated and still presented by the biased humans. So like regardless or not, it's never going to be objective.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Scary world. But yes, we can always take further discussions, and I shall set you free and everyone else as well whom are still here listening somewhat. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, and
thank you.
Please feel free to write to Pepe as how he has offered to be the source.
Yeah, if you all consent, I can send you all an email to invite you to basically get in touch with me and receive every once in a while updates. Why not? Yeah.
Nice. And with such, maybe we could also like arrange some private like half-hour Q&A that is for some enthusiasts whom have like more burning questions. That is like a supplement outside the program, like outside the timetable, only for very, very curious creatures. Like if Pepe is up for it, will you be?
Always.
See, such a nice guy, right? Like to the rest of everyone here. So thanks for that. I'm going to lock you down for that, and we can discuss your availability, and I'm going to share that with the rest of the class on the Slack or something, and maybe we just try to book you for that.
Yeah, and if I miss a question or something, just I'm sorry, just like please email me directly and I'll be happy to address it.
Exactly. And you have your Calendly that you can share a hyper one that they can book you. Yeah, he's an organized person, but very, very generous one. Thank you
All right.
once again. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.